Today, we begin our 3-round 2026 NFL mock draft with trades. If you guys are new, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let's get right into this. Blow my face with my board. It is not predictive. These are the players that I love in the order that I love them. If you want to see the full list of over 270 players, which at the end will be over 300, feel free to go over to the Patreon. You get that, all the analysis, including extended positional rankings videos. Super excited for you guys to be able to experience that because we have over 100 people already in there. So God bless you guys for doing so. Let's get right in on this because we got a lot to do and I'm ruining both of our sleep schedules. I get up now at like 5:30 in the morning to get to work. If you guys don't know, I ended up moving a little bit more north of my regular day job. So gotta wake up a little bit earlier. That doesn't stop the grind though. Number one overall, Fernando Mendoza is gonna be the pick. Let's not waste any time. It's the selection. He's a good player. It makes sense. He's actually kind of worth the number one overall pick. Not the most exciting guy in the world, but still a damn good one. But again, there are trades in this. Just like the NFL draft, it's going to be split up into 2 different days. Day one, round one is today. Day two, rounds 2 and 3 is tomorrow. I will end up re-recording that at the end and then placing it at the beginning. So at least you guys will end up having that there for you. Number two, though, the Jets. I don't think anybody's going to be willing to pay the price to move up here. I do think that Jerry Jones, if he is going to trade up to 3, it would be for Arvell Reese. I think David Bailey is kind of a Trojan horse for that to maybe increase the Jets' odds of selecting him because Jerry, in his old state, probably just wants to get another Micah Parsons. I don't think David Bailey is remotely worth that level of investment. Has the off-field concerns as well. So we are going to be going Arvell Reese, edge rusher at Ohio State there. Joseph Asai is kind of an edge 3. You look at Demario Davis, more of a mentor linebacker. Kind of perfect mitigation for Arvell Reese to see how he can end up panning out the best way possible. But at number 3, I do know Monty loves a good trade. The question is, who could be trading up and for what? Honestly, I do think the Chiefs should at least be in on this. The Chiefs and the Cowboys, respectively, are going to be in relatively, not maybe a bidding war, but I do think that they're both going to be extraordinarily interested in whether and like what the price is going to be for this selection. I don't think the Cowboys are going to be as aggressive as maybe people think with the 2 1s, and that's going to be a little bit of a turnoff to Arizona. I do think that you could try to convince me that Kansas City would try to end up making a move here, but with so many great options for KC at 9, I just don't really see a team actually willing to pay the price to move up here. Like, if you see a team thinking Jeremiah Love would be their long term answer and they could pretty much just slot him in and then he's an instant impact. It makes sense. Like if the Chiefs ended up needing to go after a running back, maybe that's where you can start trying to convince yourself. But there's just so many good options again for the Chiefs at number 9. And Dallas, again, such an expensive trade to basically get a marginal upgrade. Just doesn't make sense to me. So I do want to be able to put that out there. I think that's going to be a smart move if the Cardinals do end up engaging in that type of trade. I do think with their ability to strike at the end of one, and with the quality offensive linemen that are going to be there, Ty Simpson's going to be there. I think they actually are going to end up pivoting here to more of a pass rush focus. And Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat had a nice 1-2 punch there for a while. I think Ruben Bain's going to end up getting a little bit of love here. We have a brand new offensive head coach. Most of the time, when a new head coach comes into the building, they're either going to end up trying to push someone like Monty to be hyper aggressive, which there's not really that type of player here unless you're talking about Jeremiah Love, which LaFleur is not coming from a system that would be that ballsy for a running back at this spot. Or they're going to go a little more conservative, go after someone who's a really high floor player, the way I think about the Panthers ended up getting Derek Brown back when he ended up being selected over Isaiah Simmons. So, sorry to strike up some PTSD for you guys, Cardinals fans, but we're actually going to change it up and go Ruben Bain Jr., edge out of Miami there at number 3. I think the talent speaks for itself. The arm length's a concern, but at the same time, it didn't stop Ruben Bain from being extremely productive versus talents that had significantly better arm length. And he ended up practicing every single day against somebody who is also considered at that spot. Number 4 for the Titans, I do think Jeremiah Love is a perfect spot here. Again, with the Giants sitting there at 5, you could see a team try to jump them. I just don't really think that there's going to be anybody that values Francis Maui Noah or Mansour Delane or Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles to that degree that ends up being in that range. Again, the Dallas Cowboys could look at this and be like, ooh, interesting. We can end up making a quality move up here. But again, the price to pay and the value you get back just does not add up. Like I would say if the Cowboys move up to 3, Ruben Bain or Arvell Reese would have to be the selection, not David Bailey. Regardless, Jeremiah Love seems like the foregone conclusion there at 4. I do think if the Titans can end up making some moves and still making this happen, I'm perfectly happy with it. Number 5, we have the New York Giants. I do know they said everybody is on the table. So I'm very excited to see if anybody gets moved at this point. Paulson Adebo was not at I don't think he was at the meeting today or like the off-season training. So I'm very curious to see if they're starting to look potentially at defensive back like Mansour Delane to be able to fill that mold. He is kind of a hybrid of Marlon Humphrey and Jair Alexander in terms of like archetype, a little bit of that nickel boundary hybrid, and especially losing Cordell Flott, who also is from LSU. This could end up being the perfect marriage here because, again, right now there's maybe some question marks. We'll see if it ends up being answered with Paulson Adebo. But on top of that, boundary corner has not been solved for this team for a long time. The right guard spot is Cheeks. I think Maui Noah makes a ton of sense for this team. I do also believe that there's a lot of very high quality offensive guards in this class, and there's good offense or good corners as well. But I just personally think that somebody who's going to play a pure guard role over someone who could be a true starting boundary corner when your defensive coordinator is a defensive backs coach, just it doesn't add up to me to go after the offensive lineman if you are stuck between these two and value Mansour Delane the way that I do. And he ran the 4.3s. It's a pretty clear top 2 in the class right now, and I ended up finally moving Jermon McCoy to where he needs to be. But we had some shifting up since that corner video as well because some things ended up kind of being a little bit more clarified, and it was already a really tight race. Regardless, Mansour Delane goes at number 5 to the Giants, which is going to ruffle some people's feathers. I love Mansour Delane. I think he's a true lockdown corner. And the way that you know that I love Mansour Delane is that I hated him at Virginia Tech. So it is a true love for Mansour Delane over here at LSU. Again, he earned it. He didn't end up having it. It's not some like a type of nepotism thing where Mansour Delane, always had my heart. It's not the case. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Number 6 for the Cleveland Browns. A very interesting situation. Maui Noah might be the better option here. I know Titus Howard was traded for and brought in, but Titus Howard also is a veteran, experienced tackle who can be a swing tackle. I think that would probably be the most smart move. Like Maui Noah is an extremely tenured offensive lineman. Like David Bailey's here. So I do think that it is in the best interest maybe of like a team like the Chiefs to be looking to be able to acquire said upgraded pass rusher. It is going to be tough to evaluate like how high or how much worth the later one edges are going to have, right? You'd have to get pretty lucky with Akeem Mesidor, for example, to be able to fall that far in order to basically justify not going after an edge if it presents itself like David Bailey here in a move up. But I don't really know if the value is going to be there for the Chiefs to move up just yet, especially when you have a trade hungry team like the Washington Commanders sitting there at number 7, who would love to trade cross conference to the AFC. Regardless, I think that the Browns are going to end up taking a safe route here. Again, Titus got traded for to play right tackle, but at the same time, when you end up being gifted an offensive lineman that you didn't expect to be able to take here, you take it. And worst case scenario, you get yourself an extremely high quality offensive guard, which, that Tevin Jenkins role could end up being filled. You'll have Zion Johnson, Maui Noah, which Zion's contract's not necessarily long term either. You look at it's 3 years, but structured in a very unique manner. Then you have Elton Jenkins there. So you could end up replacing one of those two and then pairing them up with the latter and end up building yourself a quality offensive line. Number 7 for the Commanders, I am going to end up making a trade here because they got nothing in terms of draft capital. So Washington's going to be talking with Kansas City. I see David Bailey there, and I know for a fact that the Saints are lurking right there. I mean, we'll end up exiting the trade proposal window. Maybe evaluate some other teams that could be making this move. I mean, technically, the Ravens were trying to get Max Crosby as well as Trey Hendrickson. That's the rumor. That's the smoke. We'll see if that would be actually true. But at the same time, if they were that desperate to trade 2 1s, they could be in the mood to try to end up solidifying that move with a 7 spot move up. I don't think they do, but it really is Dallas Cowboys and Kansas City Chiefs. And if I'm Washington, I am perfectly happy screwing 2 NFC teams of being able to get a high tier pass rusher with gifting it to an AFC team that you're probably only truly worried about if it comes to the playoffs. So that's why I'm going to be making the move there with the Chiefs. So we select the Washington Commanders, which I actually like the layout of this right here. So I'm not like going crazy scrolling stuff. But so you see the lack of selections that Washington has. And what I love about this, and I wish honestly I might end up talking to Matt about this. I wish there was an active reader right here rather than just saying when with the proposal, because this is just as likely to accept. But for 7 to 9, I do think it ends up taking a third or a fourth. Given that you have pick 71, you could try to negotiate saying like we'll give 7 and 71 for 9 and 40. That's overly complicated. So I think you could end up talking about pick number 109, and you look at the value. This is what I love the most: 426 to 417. I think it's really solid right there. And again, Washington doesn't have enough suitors to really make much happen, and they don't have the picks. So this ends up pretty much yielding the exact same. But by the way, if I'm going to select someone for the Commanders, it's going to be Sonny Styles at this point or Caleb Downs. And I'm pretty happy with either of them falling. It would not be David Bailey because they already traded or excuse me, signed a bunch of quality edges. But the Chiefs end up moving up, even though David Bailey's not a standard Spags archetype of edge. He is still an absolute star and fits their last first round edge rusher in Felix Anudike-Uzomah's body type that just didn't end up working out, not because of the body type, but because of the talent. David Bailey has some questions, some red flags that are finally being addressed. Shout out to Dane Brugler and the Beast for addressing those. But if he ends up being able to stay on the field, which the Chiefs have plenty of those players that have some question marks, then he's going to end up doing some great things. Number 8, we have the Saints, and one of the big reasons I also was worried about having to move up with the Chiefs is because for the Saints, David Bailey is a perfect edge rusher for that system with the Brandon Staley. So at number 8, a very tough situation to be in, but I do know that Caleb Downs could be a very coveted weapon for this system. I know that it would be a great option to give Brandon Staley a super weapon like Caleb Downs, kind of give him his own Derwin James. However, let's invest in the offensive side. Carnell Tate is here. He's a quality wide receiver that is a great complement to your other Ohio State receivers. So let's make a little bit of a Buckeye reunion. Not really, but Buckeye group again and reestablish wide receiver U there down in New Orleans. Carnell Tate goes to the Saints. Number 9, again, we were sitting there with the Washington Commanders. If Carnell, like let's just say Caleb Downs was selected, it's Sonny Styles and Carnell Tate. That's where you end up debating whether Carnell Tate's worth it. But I'm so happy that we're sitting here and we still have the opportunity to go after Sonny or Caleb. Personally, I think both are phenomenal selections in their own right. Sonny Styles might need a little bit of time to develop into the talent that they end up wanting him to be. Caleb Downs, both these players are probably going to be gone within the next 2 or 3 selections. So I'm not really worried about them going to the Cowboys. But at the same time, you want to at least make sure that you lower the risk. So it's like, okay, are we going to guarantee that Sonny and Caleb are the next 2 selections if we pass on them? I think the answer is no. There's no guarantee. So you got to go after one of these players. You acquired a 4th round pick through that trading. And Sonny Styles can end up being there while you have Wagner, while you have Chanel, while you also have Frankie Louvu. It gives him enough time to acclimate to the NFL because linebacker is a very tough position to translate. And it ends up allowing him to be an absolute star for you guys for the long haul, which is the most important thing. Limit the bust factor, increase the ceiling, and Sonny Styles is well worth that. At number 10, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. And Caleb Downs is kind of screaming to me right now. It's him or Jermod McCoy. McCoy is a stud. I mean, the thing is, he tested out way better than I expected. The athleticism of 4.3 does not show up on tape. I'm just going to be so honest. It does not. but it's there. It's very clearly there. And maybe being off from football for a year allowed him to get in more pure athletic shape rather than just pure football shape. And it's great to see that. But I mean, it's good to see that the ACL also didn't slow him down. Maybe the recovery and then also the training ended up speeding him up. He does fit this Al Golden defense extraordinarily well in a Leonard Moore esque role, which Al Golden from Notre Dame, big fan of that. But going after Caleb Downs, best player available, Cook is the only reason why I'd end up, holding back a little bit. You ended up making some secondary free agency acquisitions. The problem with taking Jermod here is that you have to guarantee that you're getting rid of one of your corners who have each 1 year left on their deal, both trying to re-sign said deals. And I assume you get one out of the two, but you still are basically losing a full half year of Jermod McCoy, which I'm fine with because you get to ease him back into football. But I am going to go after the instant impact in Caleb Downs. Number 11, Miami Dolphins. I would love to run Jermod McCoy up to the podium, and I very well might. Here's my concern. My concern is you've made a lot of investments, secondary wise through free agency. But the number one thing is this is the first pick of pretty much a new organization. Jermod McCoy hasn't played football in over a year. By the time the year starts, a year and a half. That's a pretty tough first pick to hitch your wagon to. Even though the talent's there, the frame's there. Like there's a lot of stuff that's there. I just don't trust it. And I know that Hafley's coming from the Packers, who ended up really prioritizing the trenches. I think the trenches are where you should go. And what you end up needing to do is get someone on the interior of the offensive line that works extraordinarily well. But also, you have the opportunity with Spencer Fano to simultaneously end up being able to get someone who could play right tackle in a year when Austin Jackson wants to say goodbye. Now the question is there a team that wants to potentially try to jump up to this range? Because, do you need to go Spencer Fano there? I don't really think anybody's going to be making the move for Jermod McCoy over the Cowboys. So I'm going to end up going Spencer Fano, tackle out of Utah, playing guard for a short term. Great mobility, and then you can end up also kicking him out to tackle when that time comes. Number 12, we have the Dallas Cowboys. And again, I was open to making a move up for David Bailey. The opportunity did not really present itself. Christian Parker is a defensive backs coach, prioritizing more into the secondary. And Jermod McCoy could end up being very similar stylistically. You look at the physicality, the top speed of what you'd be dealing with back in Philadelphia with Quinion Mitchell. I think Jermod McCoy plays a little bit of a different style than Quinion Mitchell. Jermod McCoy is more of an ex-eraser than Quinion was. I loved Quinion from off coverage, and obviously the way he's been able to play zone match there in the Fangio system is phenomenal. But the number one corner for Christian Parker's system actually is Jair Alexander. Tried to acquire him. That's the whole entire reason they brought him into Philadelphia. So I wonder if they end up going away from this. And if they're able to go away from it, I think it gives them the opportunity to trade down and still get someone like Dylan Thieneman. And again, what are the Rams going to be targeting here? They're going to be targeting a top wide receiver. So are there going to be any teams that are really ballsy? Maybe. It's going to be tough to find one that ends up wanting to make that move. But on top of that, the Rams are open to going after offensive line. They're also looking at that cornerback, or there's also teams here that are looking at that cornerback. And you could see a team that tries to get ballsy here. The Jets, honestly, as much as we want to say that, they have all these picks, they're also a team that easily could recomp. I mean, they don't have a third round pick, but they also have a coach that's on the hot seat. I don't think we factored that in enough. If they want to jump the Rams for Jordan Tyson or Jermod McCoy, they very well could. But again, the more I'm looking at this, the less I feel very comfortable with this selection being anything but having to go slate here. And especially with Avion Trell having his issues, respectively, with his hamstring, being the 4.6s, respectively, we're going to go Jermod McCoy, cornerback out of Tennessee there. Mitigate our losses, go after someone who could end up being a true stud. And again, you're getting really good value there at 12, even though I have him at 17, respectively. Technically, he's 16 with Monroe Freeling, but there's some injury, obviously, that has kind of the not playing football for a year and a half is going to drop him a little bit more on my board than some other people. Number 13 with the Rams, I wanted to be able to make that move up with a team to jump them. Did not happen. They're sitting there and they're trying to already trade Devontae Adams. Very interesting scenario. I don't know where he goes. Maybe the Ravens because they like to feast on, old wide receivers. Honestly, it's not a bad idea either. I think that would end up yielding probably like a fourth round pick, maybe lower than that. So, I mean, Devontae's at the end of the road. Definitely something the Ravens like to be able to do whenever there's someone who is pretty much ending their career. They always seem to end it there in Baltimore for the most part. So I'm going to go Jordan Tyson here, wide receiver out of Arizona State. Instantly replaces that role at the same time. He ends up bringing that day one impact that is really honestly needed in the Rams. There's a lot of requirement for them to make it to the Super Bowl and a lot of demand on the offensive side needed. And Jordan Tyson can fill that. So they need to end up filling the right vacancies. I think Jordan Tyson can end up making that happen. At 14 for the Baltimore Ravens, people instantly want to rush Ioane and Sadiq for this pick. And I want to push back on those for these reasons. Ioane is not a Declan Doyle, the offensive coordinator type of guard. That's Joe Tooney. It's a tackle guard hybrid. Spencer Fano is much closer to the type of guard that this organization is going to look for than what you would look for in Ioane. Does that stop them? The answer is no. But it does end up making you have to at least pause before just saying, oh, Ioane is a good guard. We're going to take him here. Kenyon Sadiq, not a Declan Doyle tight end at all. Look at Chicago. Look at what Ben Johnson has dealt with. Is it a Kenyon Sadiq type of tight end? Absolutely not. So I don't know why people get this boner to go after Kenyon Sadiq. I love Sadiq. I have fully regraded him, and he is still my 14th best player. So I really am someone who is rooting for Sadiq to have a great spot. This is just not the style of tight end and not the offense that uses a tight end like Sadiq. I don't know why people can't get that through their heads. So looking at good options here, technically speaking, I don't take Peter Woods off the table. I think he's a quality piece. I do think Ioane is someone that, with the absence of a player who's much better of a system fit, Eric DeCosta is not afraid of going best player available. So I will end up going after Ioane here, but I did want to pause before just saying, oh, great guard, we're going to go with him. I do think there are better fits in this draft, but sometimes going after the better talent and just hoping your coaches can adjust is the better strategy. But again, people just so quickly go, Ioane, great guard, we're going to select him, that there has to be at least somebody bringing up the fact that he is not a perfect system fit the way that people who act like it's the greatest pick in history should end, like the way they act. They act like a way. What the hell's going on with my hair? They act in a way that Ioane is just seamless, and it's just not true. Number 15 for the Buccaneers. And again, we are in trading territory, and I love trading here with the Buccaneers, especially with a lot of the top tier weapons off the board, defensive backs still sitting here. I do think it's a great opportunity for a team that's kind of getting aggressive to move up either for Monroe Freeling, Makai Lemon, or Dylan Thieneman. I think that, you look at Kenyon Sadiq, his true range really for trade up starts around that 18-17 territory. And I respect it regardless. But I do think a team like the Steelers would absolutely be on board with trying to trade up here into the 15th spot. I've done it before. I think it's a great move for Pittsburgh to select their tackle in Monroe Freeling. However, I am going to change things up a little bit. Now, the Panthers, I don't think are off the board with Monroe Freeling. Great job by getting Rasheed Walker. There's a reason he got paid $4 million plus the potential benefits. There's some definite questions there whether he's going to be truly available for you guys. But on top of that, I do think that the Lions are going to hear, hey, there's some trades going on. Buccaneers are going to call them up, be like, hey, we're perfectly happy making a small move back. And for the Buccaneers, this is a potential double trade opportunity. Because you might say, Alex, what do you mean? What I mean is that Dylan Thieneman is probably not going to go to the Jets at 16 based on it's still very possible because Minka wants to play in the nickel. But for 17 to 15, it is pick 120. That is the value, which the Steelers end up trading up for their respective offensive tackle. I think with the other teams trying to potentially make a move up as well, it is certainly on the board. However, if I'm the Buccaneers, I'm actually perfectly happy getting like 128, and then you can end up poaching maybe one at like 213. So 315 to 318, very happy with that. The trade has been accepted. The Lions end up doing this for their own security reasons because otherwise I'm trading it to the Panthers or the Steelers or even the Eagles if they want to get ballsy. But we're going to end up going after Monroe Freeling, left tackle out of Georgia. As much as Dan Campbell says, "Oh, I want to move Penny to the left," that doesn't stop him from keeping Penny where he's been one of the best tackles in the entire NFL, as well as being able to fill that vacancy. Number 16 for the Jets, Mekhi Lemons here. It's kind of impossible to pass on him. Personality issue or not, Aaron Glenn's on the hot seat. He took one guy who's developmental. He needs somebody who's an instant impact, and that's exactly what Mekhi Lemon's going to bring to the squad. Number 17 for the Buccaneers. You still have Kenyon Sadiq here. You could easily take him, and I don't think that's a bad move because Kenyon Sadiq is kind of a great compliment there to Cade Otton. Like, it is a very realistic option here. But I am starting to think that Akeem Mesidor is just a much better fit for them. And I'm not seeing a team that's truly threatening that for a while. Maybe 22. You can talk about the Chargers. If they're trying to make a push, go for Akeem Mesidor. But I do worry about, Dylan Thieneman at this spot. Because I know at 18, there's definitely going to be demand from the Vikings. 100%. And then I know for the Panthers, Dylan Thieneman is kind of a godsend. So I do believe that I might be in the mood to move up to here. I might be in the mood with the Cowboys to just say, screw it. We got Jermon McCoy. We need the day one impact. We're going to go Dylan Thieneman. But there are also plenty of other teams that will be in the market. I think the Eagles should absolutely be looking to make a move up for Thieneman or Sadiq. I don't think either are a bad option. But I do think that Dylan Thieneman's a great option. And the Panthers, I mean, I'm not going to trade in division, but I would be making a strong push for it. I do think with the Vikings sitting there, Dylan Thieneman's not something I'm really too worried about because I'd honestly incentivize the Vikings to be able to get their own guy. So I'd be looking at a team to potentially take Kenyon Sadiq via a move up. And if I'm sitting here and I need that day one impact and I'm going to go after Akeem Mesidor, that team that could really use Kenyon Sadiq is one that's very known to trade. That's the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles are going to be making a move up with Tampa Bay. They're going to do that double trade back, the little double trade of Rooney here. And, for this range of move, again, 17 to 15 is about pick 120. This is a much higher move. I do think it will take a minimum of 98. Maybe it ends up taking 68 for this type of move. And in my opinion, that's not a horrible idea. Howie will find a way to acquire some type of draft capital in return, whether it's 116, 128. I'll end up keeping it 116 because it does keep it perfectly balanced. So you see Howie end up picking up a 4th round pick, but Tampa Bay ends up moving up and selecting pick number 68 that will be experienced tomorrow. But what's most important, because people are going to say, Kenyon Sadiq is absolutely not a Philadelphia Eagles tight end. Yes, he is. Because look at the new offensive coordinator in Sean Mannion. Just saying, I know he's a QB coach in Green Bay, but he's going to bring those elements of LaFleur's offense here. This is going to be Tucker Kraft. If you can use Kenyon Sadiq the way Tucker Kraft was used, you're getting an absolute nuclear super weapon. And I do think with a team like the Panthers lurking at 19, the Eagles do need to make that move because if you're sitting at 23, it starts getting to the point where you're taking players who are not going to impact your team at the level that you want. But Dylan Thieneman is the quick, easy run to the podium selection there for the Vikings. People want to say he's a weaker version of Harrison Smith. Learn how to actually evaluate talent, stop being lazy. A lot of it in this industry. But he is an absolute stud, top 5 player for me on my board. Again, I just think he's great. Could be a good pick for the Eagles as well. But I think that Kenyon Sadiq is so dynamic and is a perfect fit. In this offense, I actually trust what the ceiling is going to be with Sadiq. I can trust you guys to probably fill the other safety role pretty well. So Dylan Thieneman goes at number 18 to the Vikings, number 19 to the Panthers. You could end up trying to stick it to the Buccaneers by going Akeem Mesidor out of spite. That's not really a position you go after though when you pay Jalen Phillips 30 million a year. So where else can we end up going? I've seen a large push of people trying to say go Omar Cooper Jr., which to be fair, the wide receiver core is not overwhelmingly stacked. It's just a lot of solid players. I still like Emmanuel McNeil Warren. I do start to agree though, maybe it's time to try to trade back a little bit and then end up trying to see what's actually available at these spots. The question is there a single player worth moving up for? And the only player that would probably be moved up for is Emmanuel McNeil Warren because the Cowboys, I think, would be a great spot for him. And if you're going to trade back when you could absolutely use McNeil Warren, doesn't really make sense, does it? And they've been on full rehaul mode of their whole entire defense. Linebacker has already been relatively resecured. I do think defensive interior with Peter Woods could absolutely be on the board. You look at Christian Miller, he can play some nose and be able to switch with Derek Brown, respectively. Like I do like the idea of bolstering the defensive interior, but I don't really know if that's the move they're going to make. Getting someone who can end up turning the ball over and giving it to the offensive's hands, to me, ends up checking out. We're going to go Emmanuel McNeil Warren, defensive back out of Toledo. Technically speaking, Dylan Thieneman is below McNeil Warren to Daniel Jeremiah. At the same time, I think DJ's been a little bit off this cycle, so I don't know how much stock I put into that, but maybe some other scouts see it that way as well. Number 20 for the Dallas Cowboys. Our first selection, honestly, I do hope that I want PFSN, Pro Football Sports Network, to end up getting a little bit. We need to have them add that feature where you end up just saying my selection and it pops up with the team you're drafting for. But regardless, the Cowboys so far have drafted Jermod McCoy. So Avion Terrell is here. Could have ended up being a better fit with Parker. I just wanted to go best player available. I am looking at the talent here, and I am a bit underwhelmed by it. If I'm being completely honest, I'm very underwhelmed by it. And this is based on the consensus board for the record. So I do think that you look at a team like the Steelers, Omar Cooper Jr. is going to be kind of that type of target you relatively salivate for. Like it is just a very intriguing selection. Caden Proctor is going to catch some eyes for sure, but I do think Omar Cooper Jr. is going to be the belle of the ball, so to speak. You got Casey Concepcion, who has relative catching issues. You look at Denzel Boston, who is going to be a little bit lower ceiling. And then Omar Cooper Jr., who could be a dynamic stud, and in my opinion, pairs perfectly with what the Steelers have currently in their receiving core. So I think if a team's going to try to make a move, they're going to get ballsy and make a move. Technically speaking, the Browns are going to be a team that very much is interested with the demise of the Steelers' opportunity to bounce back. So I think they absolutely are on the board for a potential move up. I also think the Niners could get pretty aggressive here. You don't want to have sloppy thirds at that point. The Chiefs do need a weapon as well. We ended up basically eviscerating their opportunity to do so. The Patriots, apparently, there's a lot of drama around it, but they're very intrigued on going after a wide receiver. Could end up being worth their time to, draft Omar Cooper rather than trying to go after AJ Brown. We'll see about how that all ends up panning out. But I want to go with something new, and I really like the idea of the Browns after going after offensive line, going after their next target. So the Cowboys do need those extra picks. The Browns are flush with them. So we're going to trade 20 to 24, and I do think this is around roughly the same range, which would be about pick 120. So I think maybe 152. Ooh, really? So how close is that? Oh, 107 gets it done. Honestly, if I'm Dallas, I'm taking that deal too. And if I'm the Browns, if I get to give the middle finger in division, because remember they got Francis Mauido at their first selection, and get Omar Cooper Jr. here, who's extraordinarily balanced, used in the Big Ten to the northern climates as well. Call it a day. And honestly, his best play was against Penn State. So I'm just saying, 2 times a year, going to Pittsburgh, not a bad idea. Number 21. My Pittsburgh Steelers. Yeah, so I just screwed over my own team. That's how you know I'm not super biased. So we're sitting here at 21. Caden Proctor's very much a Steelers type of pick. I mean, he is a crazy high ceiling offensive lineman. I wish we'd end up going after, defensive back potentially. But we did do a very good job with Jamel Dean this past offseason. So we got Jamel Dean, we have Joey Porter Jr. In the nickel. You can question whether Jalen Ramsey is going to be there, more of a safety role. Not going to draft a nickel here at 21, however, based on the talents available. So you look at the offensive side, I do think wide receiver is still very much on the board. I would trade down if I could, but again, there's not one of those can't miss prospects at this point that would end up garnering that type of reaction. So I will end up going after Casey Concepcion, wide receiver out of Texas A&M to the Steelers. He is still very similar to Omar Cooper, a new style of wide receiver to the wide receiver core. Casey also brings that returning ability that we just don't have right now. So very excited to have Casey in the building. At number 22, we do have the Chargers. And I've been seeing tackle to them by a lot of people who know stuff in the league. So, as much as I disagree with it, Caden Proctor's not off the board. He's not, because you also talk about the guard implications. What I don't believe is when I see Daniel Jeremiah selecting Blake Miller, that it's something that would end up actually netting like any sense, because Blake Miller's not someone you'd kick into guard. Max Iheanacho actually is somebody who I very heavily would like to consider here. However, I think if we're going to make Max Iheanacho the selection, I need to be able to move back. Now, if we're going to move back, then the question is, who are people moving up for? And you look at the Buccaneers, and Akeem Mesidor and Peter Woods are the most likely selections. So who's going to be ballsy enough to make a short-range move to get Peter Woods or Akeem Mesidor? I think the Chicago Bears are knocking on that door. Now, the Bears have signed two defensive interiors in free agency, but none of them are remotely close to a Peter Woods type of territory. If you want to dig a little bit deeper, I do think the Texans are absolutely a highly likely team to be able to go after defensive interior. The problem is you look here at the Niners, and I am a little bit concerned that they're going to be going after the player that you go after. However, I think that's worth the risk. We're going Los Angeles Chargers trading with the Houston Texans because the Texans are going balls to the wall. And they have plenty of picks. The Chargers do not. So also a good opportunity to do so with 5 picks in his range. I think 106 is about the right amount. Okay, so we can end up tossing in something else that's a little bit more valuable. Looking at what would be a great choice. I mean, 243 is there. I don't like that too much. Let's try to big brain this one. I could end up trying to offer 69 and then 86 as part of this deal, and then we could try to get something there. I don't really like that one too much. You know what? I think the Chargers will be happy with this one. We'll give them a small 9-point discount. Unbelievable, right? But the Chargers have made the trade. The Texans have moved up, and based on the talent available, you could even look at Caden Proctor here. But I think Peter Woods, the ceiling that Peter Woods has, is worth the risk. And again, I think that's more than likely that the Texans are going to be making some type of reallocation of their picks. This is just the way to do it. Number 23, the Buccaneers. We traded back. We're still going to get Akeem Mesidor, edge out of Miami. I was happy with Peter Woods or Akeem Mesidor. You get extra draft capital, and you end up being able to still make a huge impact there. Number 24 for the Dallas Cowboys. Our first selection was Jermod McCoy. And, you could have talked about Akeem Mesidor as a good option. Even Peter Woods, if you wanted to replace Osa Digizua already, I think that would have been a dumb move. But regardless, linebacker is not off the board here. I do think that you could end up looking at Jacob Rodriguez. You look at safety, the value is just not good there. And again, that's why we moved back in the first place. So what other positions are we looking at? Keldrick Falk is not a horrible option. It's not a good one in my opinion. You do have Iheanacho here who could end up being, who could end up being the answer to your right tackle problem in the long haul. It's a weird situation. I'm not a huge fan of it for y'all in the first place. Probably Dylan Thieneman would have been the better move in retrospect, but you don't want to pass up on the ceiling just to go after the floor. So we're looking at options here. I do think Keldrick Falk is possible. TJ Parker, a very nice young edge rusher who is extraordinarily experienced, like for how young he is. I do think since we traded back, we are going to be open here to Jacob Rodriguez. He's a clear linebacker two for me in the class. Again, it just depends on what you classify Arvel Reese as. But if we're not classifying Arvel as a linebacker, then it's Rodriguez. And then you also talk about Kyle Lewis, who I love, but Kyle Lewis is also kind of an overhang slash nickel back. Regardless, Jacob Rodriguez, if you end up acquiring extra draft capital, is a very smart investment. You get day one impact there with Jermod McCoy and Jacob Rodriguez. You mitigate the potential risk there, though, with someone who is an instant number one starter on your team. Number 25 for the Chicago Bears. You look at what they can end up being investing in. Primarily, we're looking at edge. Zion Young makes a ton of sense here. Defensive interior, again, Peter Woods was a really strong selection that I was really trying to make a push for mentally, because Caden McDonald, Caleb Banks, Christian Miller, all these guys do not fit the smaller defensive interior archetype that Dennis Allen looks for. That's what, and luckily there's a lot of it in this class. Grayson Halton, love him. But someone who I really need to mention here, Caleb Proctor. He ended up becoming a top 64 player for me on my board. I think he's an absolutely amazing fit for the Bears if you cannot go after someone who I have as a top 15 player in Peter Woods. So you look at linebacker, technically you can talk about it. I don't think the value is there. Defensively, the rest of the group, I don't think you need to focus on. So offensively, I just don't really believe that you need to invest in the offense that way. You're kind of mitigating the risk and loss of the patellar tendon tear to Ozzy Trapilo. So we're here to edge, and it's Zion Young and Keldrick Falk. You talk about TJ Parker, but 6'5", 260 plus is the Dennis Allen build. Both these players are phenomenal talents. However, Zion Young does provide a little more day one value as a pass rusher, and maybe he has a couple screws loose, but there's only one guy who could probably compete with a motivated Dio Odeyingbo, and that's Zion Young. I have Keldrick Falk and Zion super close together, but Keldrick Falk, it is true, he did have a regression step in terms of his pass rush this year. Zion took a step up and did really well at the Senior Bowl. I think that I'm going to ride the hot hand. Number 26, we have the Buffalo Bills. They don't have a second round pick. That's an issue. But they do still have the opportunity to totally complete their receiving core. You have Khalil Shakir, DJ Moore, and then you have Denzel Boston. I don't think that's a horrible option. I know people hate it, but sometimes you hate what's good for you. Guard is on the table as well. Edge with Keldrick Falk does make sense in a Jim Leonard system. If you had the older McDermott system, it would make a lot more sense. So, looking at the best options for this team, defensive back, you paid too many players. I think it's a great opportunity to trade out. And honestly, you do see Keldrick Falk here. You do see Caden Proctor here. I personally think that there's some really good offensive line options that teams that are looking for such are probably going to be lurking. Now, the problem is the team that would be most likely would be the Patriots. Not going to trade in division, especially to get offensive line talent. However, if you want to look past round one, are there teams that are going to be aggressive? I do think that we could talk about the Cardinals here, but at the same time, you look at the tackle group where they're going to be investing in, and Blake Miller, Ihanachor, Lomu, Proctor, one of them's going to be there. So beyond that, you could try to talk about the Giants getting ballsy. The Texans can get ballsy again. They have a lot of selections, a lot of them. Could be one where the Bills are saying, hey, we want a noticeable move back. And the Texans are saying, we want to be able to maximize our talent. They've done it before. They ended up going after Will Anderson as well as CJ Stroud. And so I think that this would be a much lower capital investment. And for the Bills, where they just don't have a lot of legit talent, and they're trying to. I remember the Bills ended up not wanting to give up a first round pick, though, for this year for Jalen Waddle. So I don't know why they're like that. But I do think that they should at least be open to that move back, because there's not a good pick here for them. There really isn't. And offensive line is extraordinarily valuable. So I will propose a trade. And you know what? We can go crazy, because I know Nick Caserio is a crazy man. So we're going to go with it. We're going to have Texans trade up twice. And again, they've been ballsy before. They like to move, not with New England, with Buffalo. And again, you look at the pick layout here for the Texans. Honestly, it's better to get more structured on the back end. I think to be able to trade up with 38 and 59, we could end up talking about 69 here. We can end up going and I don't want to talk about that too much with you guys, but we can end up talking about like maybe pick number 126 as part of this. They'll probably want some sort of extra compensation. We'll give 167 and trade back 182. With that close range, I think I'm willing to toss it in. Trade got rejected. We're going to flip it around with Buffalo sending it because I'm perfectly happy with this. I think Houston Texans fans, you should be happy with this as well. So we're getting 38, 69, 167 for 182 and 26. So moving back and adding in 126 allows it to end up being for the Texans a move up of 12 spots. And they can end up basically moving back and recomping their selections, getting 122 or 126 and 182. For the Texans, going all in is extremely important when it's as good of value as it is here. And again, they ended up going after Peter Woods early. I do think Keldrick Falk's someone they could end up trying to stash. However, I do think at the same time, offensive line is extraordinarily important to them. And when you get the value of a Caden Proctor here or a Max Ihanachor, you take it. So Caden Proctor goes to the Texans. They get Peter Woods and Caden Proctor. We all know defensive interior and tackle are two positions they're going to draft. Why not get the best ones and end up trying to recomp your picks for good depth later on? 27 for the Niners. Did I just screw over the Chargers? Very, very likely that I just did. Because honestly, Maxi Honachor is a great choice for the Chargers. And I think that's where I'm going to go. So we're going to go Maxi Honachor here. We're seeing a small run on tackles. The Chargers had a big brain move to move back and still end up selecting Honachor for that guard tackle position. Womp, womp, not going to happen. So I think that defensive interior absolutely is on the board. You do end up seeing a vacancy on the defensive interior at nose. And you're looking at Christian Miller here, who's getting a ton of love and a ton of hype. It makes all the sense in the world. I mean, you're getting someone who is a stout run defender, has some incredible pass rush upside, and it's hard to find players who have that build with that level of skill set without having to be a rotational player. So we're going to go after Christian Miller. And honestly, a lot of people like to go defensive interior for them at 22 in the first place. 29, we have the Chiefs, who ended up trading up slightly for David Bailey. Looking at the options here, yeah, you can end up arguing Keldrick Falk was an option, but David Bailey, Keldrick Falk actually kind of balance each other. I don't think that they necessarily would be in competition with each other. You talk about TJ Parker, and that would be somebody that you can end up trying to say, oh, him, Malachi Lawrence, those are guys who can end up challenging the said status quo. Not going to happen in this case, but corner is an absolute need for this team. Avion Terrell just unfortunately hasn't proven to be healthy. So I am a little bit worried about that. And personally, I would trade back from this spot if I could, because I think D'Angelo Pons is an amazing talent that this team needs to invest in. And I think it will go a lot higher than expected. However, if I'm going to swing solely for the ceiling, I'm going to look at Brandon Cisse here. I think that his talent supersedes everybody else's. Like, I love D'Angelo Pons. Again, just the height that's a little bit buggy. You know what? I don't think this team ain't going to take no for an answer. They're going to understand that Avion Terrell is just having a hammy issue. We see the tape. Tape don't lie. Ball don't lie. Avion Terrell and David Bailey is a good combination to walk out of this draft with. Number 30, we have the Miami Dolphins, who already selected Spencer Fano, which, I'm a huge fan of that type of selection. Brandon Cisse, again, is a really good choice for this team, but I do want to evaluate all my options here. And I do think Keldrick Falk's a good one. If you're trying to build a team for the future, this is somebody who will fit instantly into what Halfley is used to in terms of solid athlete at a great size. Keldrick Falk is a good edge rusher, but it is like you have to look at the alternative options, and there's not somebody here who's just screaming, we need to take him. Like TJ Parker is the next one, who I think is a perfectly reasonable pick. But Keldrick Falk is getting overhated on at this point. I do have Keldrick Falk now sitting at, where's he at? The hell did I put Falk? Okay, he is sitting, I just saw him, number 32 on my board. So 30 is a reasonable spot. Number 31, we have the Patriots, who I think would have been open to Keldrick Falk here. Apparently open to Diana Rossini as well. But regardless, I can probably get in trouble for that one, but I think that right tackle is on the board for him. Edge rusher on the board for him. Looking at the best option here, so we're talking about TJ Parker. Malachi Lawrence fits this team hand in glove. They did take Braden Swinson last year, who is also one of the guys that I really did like. And so it does look like they would be very open to said acquisition. But people love and slob on the knob of Blake Miller. And it's very hard for me to just be like, okay, we're going to ignore that. Like, I don't think that people are alone. And Blake Miller, getting a starting offensive tackle is a lot harder to get than a starting edge rusher, in my opinion. So we're going to end up going after Blake Miller here. As much as I want to acknowledge my beautiful people for mentioning someone who I love to death, talent wise, in Malachi Lawrence, I just could not kind of come to bear on that. He's still an option here at number 32 for the Seahawks, but with so few picks, the question is like who should be moved up for. And in my opinion, Ty Simpson absolutely is. People want to say like, they want to go and say the Jets are not going to look at someone like Ty Simpson. Why not? They have 3 first-round picks next year. That's great. You know who probably won't be there next year? The offensive coordinator and the head coach. So Muji might be very open to the idea of like saying, hey, Simpson, upside wise, he's not going to prove that he's going to be bad. I mean, you also are putting him right next to Geno Smith. How hard is it to look good next to Geno Smith at this point? Unless Geno becomes great Geno, which then people don't think Ty Simpson sucks. They just think Geno's great. So I want y'all to think with me about that. Then you have that 5th-year contract, which a lot of people say, hey, it doesn't matter. It kind of does. Ask Miami. But, Ty Simpson, I think, would be an excellent option here because then you look at a team like the Colts. If they don't do well next year, Ty Simpson is a perfect option to be able to trade to a team like that or a team that's like sitting later into the first, like a Rams, that would be very open and wanted Ty Simpson, but don't want to spend the draft capital in 2027 on somebody who is a lesser tier quarterback down the line. So I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great strategy. So we're going to end up making a quick flip flop here with the Jets and the Seahawks. Because again, I also think that you can talk about screwing over the Cardinals, so to speak, which you guys know me. We're into ruining teams' dreams and futures here. I think pick 179 is probably adequate. There you go. See, I'm not that bad with trades, guys, but also this helps out. So get at least one extra selection for the Seattle Seahawks to build some depth. And Ty Simpson does end up going at the end of the first for that 5th-year contract extension. Ty Simpson is a good quarterback. I hate the narrative that he's not a good QB. He's my number 31 player in the class going at 32. I think he's a damn good player. And he showed throughout half of the year that he was at least considerable for a top quarterback option, if not the top in the class. But stay tuned tomorrow for rounds 2 and 3. Love you guys. See you later. Peace. Just like the real NFL draft.